Electorate MPs, list MPs. Hold on, list MPs aren't real MPs, are they?
They are, and having been a list MP myself, I find it just a little bit offensive when I hear people say that we work just as hard, we're elected in exactly the same way, and often our electorate is actually the whole of New Zealand, not just one small geographical area.
Okay, I'm not going to say settled petal then. Welcome to the VoterTorque podcast series from TalkPoint, and today we're talking, it's the second in the MMP series, and we're talking about the pros and cons of mixed member proportional voting systems. And let me just ask you this: if you go out for a burger, are you looking for good, cheap or quick? Well, you can only have two of the three with burgers, and the same's pretty much with electoral systems, whether you talk about single transferable votes, first past the post or MMP.
Any two of those.
Any two, but you can't have all three. So it is what it is. We've got MMP. Heather, this list MP versus electorate MP thing, I sense your sensitivity.
There is some, yes, and but there are pros and cons with any political system, and MMP is not exempt from that. Overall, I think that we get much better representation as a result of having MMP. So there's the Green parties, there's the ACT Party. They tend to be the parties that bring in fresh new ideas that the two big old parties possibly wouldn't think about.
Yeah, under FPP, apart from that brief flurry with a couple of social credit seats, there was no opportunity for people outside the mainstream National and Labour to get into Parliament.
No, that's right. And the advent of the Maori Party, I think, has been very positive for Maori. I think that Labour still take that vote for granted to a certain extent.
Yeah. So here's my take on it. For those of you that have been in the army, think officers versus non-commissioned officers, and the latter being the corporals and sergeants and the like, and warrant officers. And the discussion often goes around who's better. But the bottom line is, no one's better. Officers have a certain job to do. Warrant officers have a certain job to do. Non-commissioned officers have a certain job to do. And you can't get the whole mission done without all of them doing that. Exactly the same in business. Managers, supervisors, workers, they're not better, they're just different. And that's the same with list MPs and electorate MPs in my view.
Yeah, I think that's a very healthy way to think about it. Different doesn't mean better or worse, it just means different.
So let's talk pros and cons, Heather.
Yes, I think I mentioned before that I think MMP has brought better representation. I think we've got a much more diverse parliament as a result of MMP. We've certainly got more women MPs, but diversity is much more than just gender diversity. It's about diversity of thought and also ethnic diversity. We've got more Maori involved, we've got some Pacific Islanders, which is good, and also some New Zealanders, Chinese and Indian particularly. So I think it is much more representative than the old first past the post system, where the pale stale male thing was much more prevalent.
Yeah. Are there any other pros that come to mind?
Yes, I think that it's important to get away from having parties with fewer votes winning the election, and that was definitely the case under first past the post. So the opposition was just about always much more numerous than those in the ruling party, and that's not a healthy way of making decisions.
Yeah. What about the cons?
The cons, there's, some people would say there's an awful lot. I think there's more mixed policy. What MMP does bring is greater consensus, and sometimes that takes a while longer to get to a policy decision on. Now that, sometimes some people will see that as a negative, but I think it results in more thoughtful policy being developed that more people are happier with. So although some people will say that's a con, I actually see that as a positive too. There are a couple of issues with MMP that I would like to fix. One is, I think the 5% threshold that parties get is too high, and it prevents new parties from coming to Parliament, and I don't think we should be discouraging that. I'd like to see that dropped, if not abandoned completely. I think most people could live with a 3% threshold. That means if a party doesn't win an electorate seat, it has to get 3% of the vote. At the moment it's 5%, and that's a very tall order. Personally, I would abolish the threshold completely. I think that if a party has enough votes to get one MP in Parliament, there should be that representation.
Yeah, I agree. What do we have to fear in a robust democracy if you've got one out of 120 with some view that's not shared by most.
Yep, that's right. And I think that our electoral term is too short. I think that it inhibits long-term thinking. For the most part, a new parliament is established. It takes about a year for that to settle down and everybody to establish their places and to get policy up to speed. The second year is where the real work happens, and by the time the third year rolls around, everybody's thinking about the next election again, so their attention is diverted from ruling to being elected.
Yeah, and you hear some people who are not in favour of extending the electoral term, saying, 4 years or 5 years, it's a very long time to be stuck with someone if it's a bad government. But the reality is every government has got three-year terms since when 1972, 75 was the
That's right.
last single term.
Yep.
So it's really irrelevant, that argument.
Well, 9 years is a lot longer than 4 years if you went to a 4-year term.
Heather, you've got a blog where you've written quite a lot about this, haven't you?
I have. The blog is called onesock.nz. That's ONESOCK. And I've written a couple of blog posts about both of the issues of a lower threshold, why it's important that MMP has that, and why we should entertain a longer election term.
Great. Okay, well, I think that's probably enough on pros and cons for us today.
Yes.
If you want to ask us a question, you can go to our contact page on our website, torquepoint.co.nz. That's TORQUEPOINT. Or you can find us on Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube. Heather, have you got a political quote for us today?
I have. This quote is one that I love, and it's from a fellow called Archibald MacLeish, who sounds, for all intents and purposes, Scottish, doesn't he?
He does.
But in fact, he's not. He was an American poet, philosopher, lawyer. And this is the quote. It's about democracy again. Democracy is never a thing done. Democracy is always something that a nation must be doing.
That's great. Okay, well, that's it for us today. I'm Simon Ewing-Jarvie.
And I'm Heather Roy.
Thanks for listening.
Talk to you soon.